Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Samurai Goddess. The goddess next door takes on kung fu killers in this action-packed martial arts Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. As I was reading through Andy Watson and Josh Howard's Clubbing, I pretty much saw many of the mistakes comic publishers make when they try to make comic books that are supposed to appeal to women. And as a guy who has studied superheroines for the last 15 or 20 years and has read everything from Phantom Lady all the way up to the She-Hulk, I can pretty much tell you why many of those comics failed. And one of the core reasons why these comic books that feature heroines usually fail is due to the structure of these stories. Now, I notice whenever they make heroes that feature male characters, they often make efforts to make a full, rich, multi-dimensional character. And one of the things they do in that effort to try to make a full, rich, multi-dimensional character that's male is they try to give the character traits that you can relate to and identify with. And this is what allows the reader to pretty much connect with the character because they see themselves in the experiences of the character or the life of the character. And whenever I read any comic book that features a heroine, there's often no effort to try to create a person with character traits that you can relate to or identify with. In many cases, they just give you a heroine, tell you she's female and she has powers, or she's just there in the story, but there's no reason for you to relate to them. And because there's no reason for you to relate or identify with them, you have no reason to care about them. And that was one of the problems I had with this Clubbing graphic novel. There was no reason to care about the heroine in this story. She's just kind of there, and stuff just kind of happens. There's no reason for me to get involved with the story, and that usually makes these stories featuring comic book heroines a chore to read, because you want something substantive there that allows you to connect with the character's story, and the character's experience. And this is one of the big things that is usually missing from comic books featuring heroines, and this is one of the core reasons why these comic books have a hard time selling in the marketplace. A lot of people think we'll just put an attractive woman in a story and that's going to pretty much sell it, but that will get people's attention for a moment, but that's not going to sell the next issue. And comic books and graphic novels are all about selling the next appearance of that character and building a word of mouth. And that's hard to do when the writers make no effort to put any sort of substance or depth on the character. And when it comes down to heroines in general, there is no real effort made to put substance and depth on the character that allows you to have that personal connection with them as characters. Now, the other thing that makes comic books featuring heroines usually fail are the stories or the lack of a story. Now, this was another problem I had with this Clubbing graphic novel, was that there was no real story. It was just a series of events that happened, but there's no sequence to them, no structure to them. And because there's no sequence and no structure to them, this is what prevents the reader from becoming compelled to continue to read to the end. And this is something I've seen that happened with many Marvel comics from the 1960s on, such as your Ms. Marvels, and many of your other books like Claws of the Cat. They just really were just featured a heroine in a nice costume, but they never featured a story that could get you involved in the action. They just show up, stuff just kind of happens, and we're supposed to have an incentive to buy the next issue because they're female. I'm sorry, that's just not good enough for me, and it's not good enough for many readers. When you're selling comics, again, the reader wants an incentive and a reason to buy the next issue, and if the first issue in their hands is just not good enough, they have no reason to go pick up the second or the third issue. And this is something that I've seen that happened not only with this DC Minx line, which came out in 2007, but it's something I see with SJW Marvel right now. Now, SJW Marvel wants to give you heroines and wants to try to push comics to women, but they don't want to give women anything that they want to buy in those comics, because what's between the pages of that comic is what's going to sell that comic to readers, but you can't tell that to many people in the publishing industry as it relates to these heroines. When it comes down to heroines, they don't want to give readers anything of substance between the pages of those stories, and that's why those stories sell so poorly. And another issue I have with these comics that feature heroines, like I had with this clubbing book, was the problem as it relates to story again. And this is with character transformation arcs. Now, when it comes down to male heroes such as your Luke Skywalkers and many others, we get to see this character transformation arc. And in this character transformation arc, we get to see this character start out at point A as one way, and then by the end of the story, they completely change into someone else. And we rarely ever get to see that with heroines. I mean, we might have gotten to see it in the movies with Alien with Ripley, but again, that was only because the Ripley character was originally written to be a man. So when that story, Sigourney Weaver got lucky because they couldn't find anyone to play that role, and she lucked out on a story which features a heroine who could play into a character transformation arc. But when it comes down to heroines in comics, we rarely ever get to see a character transformation arc. And because we don't get to see that character transformation arc, we don't get to see a character we connect to, relate to, and identify with, and we never get to see somebody we care about change in ways that pretty much show us, how we change over a course of time. And that's what stories are all about. Stories are about not only going from point A to point B, but the characters teaching us a lesson that we learn as we get from point A to point B. And as I was reading this clubbing graphic novel, which was really sad because Josh Howard's art is beautiful in this book, I didn't get to see that character transformation arc. I didn't get to see that character change in ways that pretty much would show me how this character started out as a selfish person and then became a different person. And that's something that many readers want to see with heroines, but we never get to see it in any form of media as it relates to science fiction or fantasy or comic books. And it pretty much prevents readers from wanting to read stories featuring heroines. And the reason why they don't want to read it is because there's no character transformation arc. Guys like Luke Skywalker pretty much grow and change. Guys like Indiana Jones grow and change. Guys like Iron Man grow and change. But we don't get to see heroines grow and change. And because they go through no character transformation arc, the readers have no incentive to buy the book. Readers, when they go out and buy comics, they want to see that character transformation arc. They want to see that character grow. They want to see that character, go through these changes, learn from their experiences, because we learn as they learn. And we want to see that as it relates to heroines. And I'm starting to see, as it relates to the media in comics, as it relates to heroines, nothing, sadly, has really changed in the last 40 or 50 years. And the reason why nothing has changed is because most of the people are still trying to use the same archaic approach of trying to pander to female readers. They're trying to dumb down things to female readers, and they're trying to simplify things when you don't need to do that. As a publisher who writes heroines on the regular with the ISIS series and the E-Steam series, I don't dumb anything down. I don't try to pander to women. I try to keep everything written in a way that is easy to follow, and I try to make my heroines people that have multidimensionality, people you can identify with, people you can relate to, and I try to write compelling stories that pretty much get the reader interested in the character. Moreover, I try to make efforts to put character transformation arcs on my character, just like I do in my young adult novels and my screenplays, such as All About Nikki. Now, with the All About Nikki character, I created this rich character who was spoiled, but because she has multidimensionality, you pretty much identify with her and relate to her. Same thing with the Colleen character in the Thetas. I tried to make a character that was somebody you could identify with and relate to. And even with the Matilda Crowley character, I try to make someone you can identify with and relate to. So as you're reading the story, this is somebody you can say, "This is me. This is my experience, and I'm watching this character, and I'm caring about them, and I'm feeling compelled to continue reading because this is someone who has experiences that I like, and is in a story that is pretty much drawing me in." And this is another big problem that I see with comics featuring heroines. They have some of the slowest pacing known to man. They just have all these expository sequences in them and no action. Now, when I write heroines, I always try to get to the action within the first 3 to 5 pages or even the 10th page because I understand how pacing works. And in today's competitive marketplace where books and comics have to compete with Netflix, television, DVDs, and many other forms of media, you have to get the reader interested in the story in less than 3 to 5 or even 10 pages. So I try to get to the action very quickly, establishing who this heroine is, what she wants to do, what obstacles she is facing, and most importantly, giving you a reason to care to continue reading the story. As I see it, the faster you get the reader into the story, the faster you're going to make the sale to the customer. And that can be a customer, whether they be male or female. They want a heroine that has that depth, that has that richness, and has that multidimensionality that makes you see a person and see somebody you care about, not just a story that just features a woman who's just there and you should buy her just because she's female. I'm sorry, that's just not enough for most customers as it relates to comics, and that's why heroines struggle in the comic book marketplace, because when it comes down to comic books, they try to dumb the heroines down. They don't give them character transformation arcs. They give them light obstacles. They give them minimal conflicts, and people aren't going to pay $5 or $6 for a story that is only half of what they're going to get with the guys. They want the same type of story, the same type of experience, the same type of action and adventure, and the same type of escape that the reader would get when they would read a story featuring a male hero. And this is something that the people at Marvel don't understand, the people at DC don't understand, and many other comic publishing companies understand as it relates to selling heroines. When it comes down to selling heroines, you have to give the reader the same reading experience that they would get featuring a male hero in order to make them interested in continuing to want to read that story. If they don't see any reason for continuing to read that story past the first 3 pages, then they don't have a reason to go out and buy this book that's in their hands or the next book that's coming up the next month. Comics are about selling a series, and this is another thing they don't understand about heroines, and you have to sell the series with not only the book in your hand, but you have to give people a reason to continue buying the next one. And then when I look at all these campaigns like SJW, Marvel, and why they fail, one of the core reasons why they fail is because a lot of these writers just don't know how to structure stories as it relates to heroines, and they don't know how to go out and make a story that pretty much gives us a reason to relate to these characters, identify with them, or care about them. They'll have a good look about them, but that's all that is. It's flash, and none of it is substance. And you need substance if you hope to build an audience for a heroine. And when it comes down to heroines these days, I just don't see a lot of substance out there. And this is why comics pretty much featuring heroines struggle to sell these days as they did in the 1970s, because these guys just don't want to put the substance and the hard work into the stories that would make these characters fan favorites. Now, a lot of people will say they're trying to sell to girls, but you shouldn't be trying to sell to girls. When I write ISIS series stories or E-Steam series stories, I don't try to sell to girls. I try to sell to the largest audience possible. And yes, I am making female characters because I want to make positive black female heroines, but I really don't care who picks it up and reads it. As long as the character resonates with the reader, that's all that really matters overall. And if you tell a good story, the character pretty much is going to connect with the reader and they're going to pretty much going to continue to buy those stories on the regular. The way I see it, everybody's approach to trying to write heroines and trying to appeal to female readers needs to change. And if they change their approach, maybe they would wind up having more women interested in comics, because they would just be interested in the stories, not in just in the look of a character. Because a character can have a great look, but if they don't have great stories, they're not going to build an audience of readers. If you want to try out the ISIS series or the E-Steam series, you may do so by clicking the link in the description box. It'll take you to Amazon.com, where all the titles are. And if you really like what's on this channel, you can donate $1 or whatever you wish to my Patreon. That will help me make more videos and publish more books. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.